You ever seen a town that feels like it never forgave itself for surviving? Not because it was too strong, but because it learned how to pretend. Pretend the trees weren't once used for hanging. Pretend the dirt roads weren't built on broken promises. Pretend that justice had ever lived here at all. This story don't start in a courtroom. It don't start in a newspaper. It starts on a porch, with crack from heat, red clay stuck in the grooves of boots too tired to care, and a man named Walter, just sitting quiet, watching the world pass him by. Welcome to Injustice Browning. My name is Mark Joie. If this story reaches your spirit, subscribe and leave your truth in the comments. We tell stories here that the world tried to bury. Walter was the kind of man you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. Quiet, hands calloused from working jobs nobody else wanted, Vietnam vet, purple, heart, tucked away in a drawer with pictures of a boy, a woman long gone, and a life that never quite went how it should have. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice held weight, not loud, just heavy, like someone who'd seen too much and trusted the little dot. His son, Yelen, was the kind of boy who still believed things could get better, that if you kept your head down, stayed in school, and prayed before bed, maybe the world would leave you be. He was 17, played ball, fixed up bikes on the weekend, always helped Miss Ruth carry her groceries when her knees started giving out. But in towns like this, a black boy's goodness don't matter near as much as a white girl's tears. It was a Thursday when it started, humid, slow, nothing out of place. Yelen went out after dinner, said he'd be home by 10. He never was the type to run late. So when midnight rolled around and Walter was still sitting on that porch, staring out into the dark, he already knew something had happened. The silence said it louder than any siren dot by morning. The whispers had already started. Somebody said there was a break-in. Somebody else said drugs. The loudest voice in town, the one with the badge, said it was Yelen, caught red-handed. They claimed a girl, white, shaken up, crying about a boy in a hoodie, a stolen bracelet, maybe more. Her daddy owned half the town, owned the silence too. Walter walked into the station calm, didn't yell, didn't beg, just asked to see his son. They told him Yelen had confessed, said it was already being processed. No lawyer, no witness, just a signature and a story written before Yelen ever opened his mouth. Now you tell me what kind of confession comes without a call home. People in town didn't ask questions. They just nodded and kept mowing their lawns. This wasn't new. It was just quiet enough to ignore. Walter went home that night and sat back down on the porch. Same chair, same boots, same red dust in the cracks, but something in him was different now. His silence wasn't peace anymore, it was war held in check. Every night, the same sirens passed by, and every night, he counted them like prayers that never reached the ceiling. You see, Walter fought for this country overseas, got shot trying to protect it, but back here, in the town where he was born, all he got was suspicion. Didn't matter he wore the uniform. Didn't matter he raised a boy right. All it took was one story, one accusation, and they threw everything he'd built into the fire. That's the thing about places like this. Truth don't live in evidence. It lives in who they decide is guilty first. And Yelen. Yelen was guilty the moment he fit the description. But this ain't where the story ends. This is just where the lie begins. Because buried under the red clay and broken laws is a fire that don't die easy. And Walter wasn't finished yet. You ever seen a man try to hold back a hurricane with nothing but a folder full of papers? That's what Walter looked like standing in that courthouse. Same boots, same quiet fire in his eyes. But now, he was up against something older than any storm, older than the war, older than his son. He was staring into the face of a system that knew how to smile while it bled you dry. Yelen had already been processed by the time Walter showed up at the jail. They said he confessed, said he didn't ask for a lawyer, said it all happened clean and quick, like he wanted to go to prison. Like a 17-year-old black boy would just walk in and fold under pressure without anyone needing to twist the knife. No phone call, no warning, no second chance. Walter asked to see the confession. The detective, a pale man with a pot belly and mirrored sunglasses, held up a single sheet of paper. No recording, no witness, just a scrawl that didn't even look like Yelen's handwriting. You're lucky he confessed, the man muttered, like he was offering a favor. This could have been a whole lot worse than stealing his life. Walter kept his hands steady, but inside, his blood burned. He'd been shot before. Watched brothers die in the mud, but nothing had ever made him feel this helpless. He raised Yelen right, taught him to speak with respect, to keep his head down, to answer yes, sir, even when it tasted like sand. But none of that mattered here. Not when the girl crying in the next room had skin they were born to believe. The courthouse smelled like lemon floor cleaner and old sweat. Walter sat in the back row. Sue pressed, hands folded tight. They assigned Yelen a court-appointed lawyer, who barely looked at him, said things like, "Let's not make this worse." And pleading out might be the smart move, pleading to something he didn't do. There was no trial, no real defense, just a few statements read out loud like facts. Yelen Matthews entered through the back door, stole a gold bracelet, scared the victim. No prior convictions, but the court finds that was all it took. A couple sentences, a nod from the judge, a gavel dropped like thunder in the chest. 6 years. That was the price for being in the wrong town, in the wrong skin, at the wrong time. And Walter just sat there, jaw clenched, watching them carry his boy out like trash. He tried to fight, filed motions, asked for appeals, spoke to anyone who listened, but they always found a way not to. Paperwork lost, clerks misplacing signatures, offices that didn't return calls, meetings that were rescheduled indefinitely. The system didn't have to shout. It just had to stall. That's how it wins, by making sure you run out of time before you run out of hope. Walter stood outside the courthouse one afternoon, the bricks behind him older than his grandfather, built by hands that were chained while they laid them, hands that looked like his. He could almost hear them whispering from the mortar, "This place was never built for you." It wasn't rage that broke Walter down, it was the silence after every letter got returned unopened, the silence when no one else in town would look him in the eye, the silence in his own house when he passed Yelen's room and still expected to hear music leaking under the door. Miss Ruth came by sometimes. She'd sit with Walter on the porch and pass him a slice of sweet potato pie she made fresh, just like when Yelen was little. They didn't speak much, just sat in the heat and watched the cars roll by, pretending one of them might stop and fix things, but they never did, because in places like this, justice ain't broken, it's working exactly how it was designed, too. And the worst part, they all knew it. They knew Yelen was smart. They knew Walter was a soldier. They knew the girl's story was thin, but it didn't matter. The rules were never written for them. And once they put Yelen behind bars, the town moved on like nothing happened. But Walter didn't. He couldn't. Because every father has a breaking point. And Walter was getting close. There's a certain kind of silence in a prison cell. It ain't the quiet you get in the woods or on a porch late at night. It's heavier than that. It's the kind of silence that waits, watches, presses down on your chest until you forget what fresh air even smells like. That's what Yelen woke up to on his first night behind bars. 17 years old. No record, no warning, just 4 walls, a rusted toilet, and a cot that smelled like sweat and bleach. That first night, he didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just laid there, wide awake, listening to the sounds of grown men breaking behind steel. And still, somehow, he held on. They called him fresh on the block. Meant he hadn't been broken yet. Meant they were watching him, waiting for that first crack. But Yelena didn't crack. He listened, learned, watched how the world worked in reverse inside those walls. And funny thing is, some of the realest men he ever met were locked right there with him. There was Big Curtis, who used to teach math in Mississippi before. A crooked cop planted dope in his glove box. He taught Yelen algebra in the yard with chalk and broken tile. There was Miguel, who could quote Baldwin like scripture and made Yelen write essays every Sunday like homework. "You ain't just doing time," he told him once. "Time is doing you. Make sure you come out different than how you came in." And then there was Mr. Earl, 6 to 7, 2 strikes, 1 Bible, and a voice like thunder when he prayed. He pulled Yelen aside one night during chow and said, "They took your freedom, son. Don't let them take your mind too. That stuck. But what kept Yelen alive, what really kept his spirit from going numb, were the letters. Miss Ruth wrote every single week, no matter what. Sometimes just a few lines, sometimes whole pages, but always in that same steady handwriting, always with love pressed into every word. She told him about the garden, about the dog that kept digging holes in the yard, about the town acting like nothing happened. And every letter ended the same way. Don't let them make you forget who you are." He kept those letters folded inside a showbox under his bunk. read them so many times he didn't even need to open them anymore. He could recite them like prayers some nights. When the lights shut off and the shouting stopped, he'd close his eyes and pretend he was back home, sitting on the porch, smelling that sweet potato pie cooling in the window, listening to the cicadas hum like they knew how long life could drag on. Years passed like winters in slow motion, and Yelena changed, not hardened, sharpened. He started tutoring younger inmates, took every class they offered, earned a GED, then pushed for more, wrote letters to the outside, set appeals, not because he thought they'd answer, but because he refused to let them silence him. He worked in the kitchen, swept the floors, learned Spanish from a cellmate just because it gave him one more way to understand the world. They tried to shrink, and somehow, through all of it, he never let bitterness take root, because bitterness rots you from the inside, and Yelena wanted to walk out whole, not hollowed out by the time his release day came. He wasn't the same kid they threw behind bars. He was 25, 8 years older, 10 years wiser. He stepped out into the sunlight like a man who'd been buried and dug his way back up. No cameras, no welcome party, just Miss Ruth, waiting by the car, tears on her cheeks, hands shaking. She didn't say a word, just opened her arms and held her grandson like she knew what it cost him to still be standing. And Yelena, he didn't cry. He just whispered, "I'm here," because sometimes surviving is the loudest thing you can say. Time don't always heal. Sometimes it just hides the wound better. It had been nearly a decade since Yelena walked out of that cell. Walter's back was bent now, his beard gone gray, hands a little slower on the rake. The porch was still the same swing, same wind, same quiet ache, but the town had changed, or at least pretended to. There was a new mayor, new faces. In the police department, a few murals on walls that used to be blank, but underneath, the roots hadn't shifted an inch. Then came the film crew. They said they were doing a piece on small towns and race trying to dig into cases that never made the news. Said they'd heard whispers about a boy who got locked up without a lawyer, a father who never gave up. A story that didn't sit right even after all these years. At first, Walter didn't speak, just watched from the porch like always. But something in him had started to itch. Maybe it was the way the wind moved that day, or maybe it was the letter he got from a name he hadn't heard in years. Emily. She was back, quiet, alone, no husband, no makeup, just a thin woman with tired eyes and a notebook full of guilt. She'd left the town not long after the trial, married someone rich, lived out in Atlanta, but it didn't stick. Turns out, no amount of distance can muffle a lie that loud. The thing about lies, they don't stay buried. They move, they whisper, they press up from under the floorboards until they start shaking the walls. Emily couldn't sleep anymore, couldn't look her own child in the eye without seeing what she'd done to someone else's. So she reached out to the filmmakers, told them she had something to say. At first, nobody believed it. Why now? Why her? But then Walter agreed to sit down for an interview. First time he'd spoken publicly since the trial. Sat in his old Sunday clothes, tie crooked, voice low. He didn't scream, didn't accuse, just told the story like it happened. Every word plain, every sentence sharp. And then Emily stepped in front of the camera. You could see it in her hands, the way they shook, the way her breath caught before she spoke. She looked straight ahead, and the words came out like broken glass. I lied. She said she was scared, said her father told her what to say, so the sheriff helped cover it up. Told her if she didn't cooperate, it would ruin everything. Said she didn't even know Yelena's name until they told her who to point to. It all came out. The fake confession, the missing evidence, the threats. The old sheriff, retired now, living off a fat pension in a house twice the size of Walter's. When reporters tried to question him, he slammed the door shut, but the wave had already started. The film went online, quiet at first, then louder. The story spread, picked up by blogs, local news, finally national outlets, and just like that, the silence cracked. People started talking, not just strangers, but neighbors, the same ones who looked away years ago. Some apologized, some stayed quiet, but the spell was broken. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Yelena didn't give a speech, didn't go online. He watched the interview from Miss Ruth's living room, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. He wasn't angry. He was still in the way of fires before it spreads, because after everything, He never wanted pity. He wanted what was his. The right to exist without fear. The right to tell his story without it being erased. And now, finally, someone else was saying it for him. This wasn't justice, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. And sometimes that's all you need to let the fire in. Justice don't always come fast. Sometimes it don't come loud. Sometimes it just walks in, slow, quiet, measured, like a man who's been waiting his whole life to breathe without permission. Yelena stood in front of the courthouse the morning the judge read the words out loud. Exonerated. One word. That's all. No apology in the judge's voice. No tears from the courtroom. Just paperwork, a stamp, a signature. Like the years they took from him were something that could be returned. Wrapped in red tape and a press release. Miss Ruth squeezed his hand. Walter stood beside them, shoulders straight, chin up. They didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just stood still, because when a man's been buried that deep, standing is enough. A lawyer from out of town filed the reparations lawsuit the next day. Said the state owed Yelena for every minute he spent in that cell, for every birthday he missed, for every job he never got the chance to earn. They knew the settlement wouldn't fix it. But it wasn't about fixing anymore. It was about marking it, naming it, making the record show what the world already knew, that the system was wrong. The mayor called a press conference, read a statement, eyes down, voice careful, said the town regretted the mistakes made, said they were taking steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. No one believed him, but the camera did, and sometimes that's all they care about. Jalen didn't speak to the press, didn't post a video, didn't stand on a stage with his fist in the air. He just walked right past the courthouse that took his youth, right down the street where they used to whisper his name like it was a warning, and into a school built less than 3 blocks away. That's where he works now, not because it's easy, but because that's where the next ones are. Kids who look like him. Kids who already know what fear smells like when it pulls up next to you in a cruiser. Kids who've been told they have to be twice as good just to be seen as enough. Jalen teaches them history, teaches them writing, but mostly he teaches them how to see themselves clear before the world tries to twist the mirror. He never raises his voice, doesn't need to. His presence is loud enough. Miss Ruth still packs him lunch most mornings, sits on the porch with Walter when the sun gets low, watching her grandson walk through the same town that once tried to erase him. Walter doesn't say much these days, doesn't have to. His eyes carry the rest. You see, justice didn't come for Walter in a courtroom. It came in the form of watching his son become a man the world couldn't crush, and that was enough. Emily moved away for good. No interviews, since no books, just gone. The sheriff, still quiet in retirement, still pretending he didn't know. But that's the thing about truth, it don't need your permission to exist. It just waits. Waits under the floorboards, waits in the cracks of old courthouses, waits in the breath of men like Yelena who choose not to burn the world down, but to rebuild it one student, one story, one quiet morning at a time. Because real power isn't in revenge. It's in ignorance. And Yelena endured. He didn't become what they tried to make him. He became more. That's the end of the fire beneath the floorboards. If the story stirred something and you hit that subscribe button right now, drop a comment below. I want to hear from you. This is Mark Joie, and you're watching Injustice Browning. We speak the names they tried to forget. We remember what silence tried to erase.